Hey guys, Chris here, and I'm Ukrainian Canadian. Today's November 22nd, 2022, and let's get over the news happening in Ukraine, shall we? So, today, lots of news in terms of the operations that the Ukrainians are conducting in Kinburn Spit. The General Staff of Ukraine has confirmed that they are conducting operations in the Kinburn Spit. And if you guys don't remember, I did mention that I did spend some time here as a kid in the summer. And so the main reason why is because they indicate that they want to secure the grain corridor that goes to the port of Mykolaiv. So if we look here, this is the Spit, and Mykolaiv is just a little bit more north of the Kinburn Spit, and the city is right here. It's a major port. It used to be a Soviet port that built a lot of ships, Soviet ships, and it is very crucial for the Ukrainians to be able to have control over the access to Mykolaiv in terms of the water access. So it is a good move. Again, I indicated that I think about 2 weeks ago that the Ukrainians started conducting operations, so perhaps it's going a little bit slower. And from my personal experience spending time here, it is a very sandy and swampy area, difficult to get by. And because obviously it's a very narrow territory, very small territory, the Ukrainian forces want to make sure that they're conducting this operation in complete silence without any imagery, because it would be very easy for the Russians to pinpoint the locations where the Ukrainian forces could be. So hopefully, in the next couple of weeks, the Ukrainian forces will be able to secure this entire area. Again, it's really going to be good because this also gives a good position for the Ukrainians to start launching further attacks into southern Kherson and continuing their push towards the Crimean borders and towards eventually Melitopol, which is in Zaporizhia. So this is a really strategic point for the Ukrainian forces to liberate and position themselves accordingly. And this is also the last territory that the Russians control of Mykolaiv Oblast. So very, very important asset to control for the Ukrainian army. Again, the Ukrainians are also pinpointing strikes all throughout the left bank of the Dnieper River. The Russians are still there, and the Ukrainians are trying to push them out as far as possible to be able to secure specifically Kherson City, so the Russians won't be able to shell it because they're currently shelling Kherson City occasionally at night, which obviously causes issues because there's a lot of people that still live in Kherson City. So let's hope for a quick Russian withdrawal from the left bank. Let's hope for the next couple of weeks as the winter comes, especially in southern Ukraine. It comes later. It's much more warmer climate. The Russians won't have any choice but to withdraw. And in terms of the map as well, I wanted to say that there haven't been any major changes. The same things are happening today. So that's why I'm not really going to talk about it. You already know the deal in Eastern Donbass. The Russians are doing the same thing they've been doing for the last couple months. And so far, things are still at a standstill. So perhaps tomorrow, or if not within a couple of days, I'll report back as to what new advancements are going to be happening, which I'm very certain of. So, interesting tweet by Anton Herashenko indicating that Russia is potentially, and again, it's unconfirmed, so I'm leaving this up to you to think what you believe. But Russia is apparently getting ready for a second wave of mobilization in January of next year, and the plan is apparently to draft 500,000 to 700,000 soldiers. And this is already considering that they've drafted, according to the Russian Defense Ministry, around 300,000, which are probably already killed, wounded, demoralized, and some of them, obviously still are in the front lines. But I think the Russian military realizes that even the 300K more that they've added isn't really helping their cause right now. So I think that this is very, very true. This I wouldn't be surprised if that happens even earlier, to be honest. Putin has no choice. It's really the Russians, as I've mentioned here, are you know giving themselves World War II solutions for modern warfare problems. They're trying to win this war through quantity over quality and really changing their strategies, which they're unable to do because they're so corrupt from the bottom to the top. or top to bottom, I should say. The Russian army has no more choice but to really find quick solution, quick band-aid solution, which is the easiest one, is to just throw as much soldiers as they can to really overwhelm the Ukrainian forces and exhaust the Western supplies of weaponry. And so far, it's somewhat working because, we've already been hearing reports that the West is sort of getting tired of helping Ukraine, and there's a lot of attitudes that even seeing in certain of my comments that the United States should not be providing help for Ukraine anymore. It's too expensive, and this is the Russian strategy. They see that this seems to be partially working, and so it's of course. A little bit scary to see and hear that because it's a massive amount of Russian soldiers heading to the front lines potentially. Now, let's not overlook the fact that adding 500 to 700,000 extra mobilized soldiers does not go unnoticed in Russia. And for a population that was told that this would be a quick victory, a quick win, and it's still a special military operation at this point, I'm pretty sure that this will not go be well digested in Russia, and many Russian people could start considering a certain revolution because this is not the contract that they've agreed to when they put Putin in power, and they've accepted him as the Tsar of Russia. They don't want to be fighting a war that they're losing, right? And as soon as they see that Russia is losing, this is when Putin is in real trouble. So it'll be interesting to see what the Russian reaction is. Again, don't expect much, but it's still concerning to see that perhaps in the next few weeks, Russia will start mobilization, the phase two of their mobilization. And again, not surprising, but the Russians are accused of burning their bodies in Kherson landfills. And again, it's just proof of the lack of dignity that the Russian state and their people have towards their own. And I've highlighted a very interesting part of this article by The Guardian, which talks about workers that worked in the landfill and they didn't come at the right time. And they said here that they were not allowed anywhere near the area of the landfill where they were burning the bodies. And one of these workers said that when they came here, they left some of their soldier guards and unloaded and burned them. One day, her and her husband arrived to work and they came at the wrong time. And while they came there, they were doing their business, which was burning their bodies, putting them in the landfills. And they saw them and gave her husband a hard blow in the face with a club. So again, typical Russian behavior. But what is, disgusting is the fact that there is no dignity, even for their own soldiers. They don't care. They just throw in landfills, and that's the fate. You can see this is an actual image from one of these landfills where you can see the helmets of some of these soldiers and bulletproof vests. And I wouldn't be surprised if some of them are already, underneath all that pile of trash. So, I mean, it's kind of a metaphor for the Russian army, to be honest. But it's still, human lives, and you can see how Russians lack even respect for their own soldiers. This is a very interesting article, and this is essentially the very first Shahed drones that were shut down by Ukraine that remain intact. So there's a group that started the analysis of these components of these drones to see, where did these components come from? How did Iran manage to build these drones? Because they're quite advanced. And essentially, they found that most of these components in these drones were based from Asia, Europe, and the United States. And the people that worked for this company, CAR, they documented more than 500 components spanning some 200 unique models across all these UAVs that they've captured from Iran in Ukraine. And more than 70 manufacturers, they found that more than 70 manufacturers based in 13 different countries and territories produce these components, and most of them are from the West. But what is more alarming to me personally is that 82% of these components that they found that came from the West were manufactured by companies based in the United States. Yes, the United States. So 82% of that, of this UAV essentially, is funded and provided, all these parts are funded and provided by the United States. And so obviously they're not going to be identifying who these manufacturers are just for security purposes and just really making sure that they do their due diligence. But that's very alarming that Iran somehow managed to get acquire these components in the market that they weren't supposed to be able to acquire. So it's very alarming that these sanctions seem to not really be working well if somehow they got almost 82% of their components from the United States. And many of them have been recently manufactured. So it's not like it's something that they grabbed like 10, 20 years ago. This was produced, parts that were produced in 2020 and 2021. So begs the question, of course, how they were able to acquire that. And more sad coal lines being built by the Russians. This is in Belgorod, so in Russia. And so they're building defense lines because they're paranoid that the Ukrainian forces are going to invade Belgorod. And you can see I mean, I really don't understand how this is going to stop any invading force. It's literally like an aqueduct or something, like an irrigation ditch for farming that they're building here. It's really not going to stop a tank from moving, and neither is it going to stop soldiers. If anything, this looks more like a trench that can be used by the Ukrainian forces to potentially, set up camp here. But of course, the Ukrainians have never wanted to invade Russia. That has never been the goal. Ukrainians want to get back their territory. That's all we and myself as well, I want to see. We don't want, and the Ukrainian people don't want to grab Russia. It's never been an interest to, try to fix a failing country anyways. And so I don't understand what the point of it is, but again, I think it's just for a PR move for the governor of Belgrade because they have been struck multiple times by the Ukrainians, and it's only been infrastructure and military infrastructure. So I think that he needs to show something for the people that are complaining that, they feel helpless and they need to be better at defending themselves. But again, the Ukrainians do not want to even step into Russia. That's not the goal here. So before I finish, I have two videos, and this is a quite, again, I've told you yesterday in Medvedev's comments about Ukraine people being cockroaches, and this is just a very typical mindset that exists in urban Russia. I obviously don't believe, every Russian believes that, but these are comments just made by a couple about Ukrainians. And again, this is just one couple, but I wouldn't be surprised if many of these people in Russia have very similar attitudes. So let's hear what they have to say. So he says, I don't know, these chochols, they need to be crushed. And chochol is essentially a term for Ukrainian people, but a very like bad term, related to Ukrainian people. Mostly from the Cossack era because the Cossacks had, like one little like ponytail type of thing on top of their hairs, and that's how they call them chocho. Anyways, so he mentions that the Ukrainians need to be crushed and killed, and I don't know how we can deal with them. Um, I hate these scum. They are fascists. And he says, what should we do with the captured Ukrainian forces? He says, we need to kill them all. They're not needed. They are scum. And that's it. And his wife supports what he says. She says they are non-humans. So again, it's not surprising. I mean, these are all people that grew up during the Soviet Union. They're very easy to brainwash. They probably listen to Rossiya, the Russian One channel every day. So they believe all the lies they're telling them that the Ukrainians are killing kids and crucifying, Russian soldiers and shooting them down. So you can see it's a nasty attitude, but you just can't reform these people at this point. You can't. Unfortunately, that's the case. This is a T-64 BM, so modernized T-64 Ukrainian tank. And you can see what the weather right now is doing to all of these heavy equipments, the heavy cavalry in Ukraine. So it's completely stuck in the mud. And the only way you can take it out is from another tank that is, has enough torque to push it out away from the mud. So it's crazy just seeing how stuck in the mud this tank is. Unbelievable. And this is one of the most modern tanks that Ukraine has produced. Again, it's a T-64, but it's heavily modernized. And last but not least, Russia's imperial ambitions do not just stop in Eastern Europe or Europe itself, but also in Asia, specifically Kazakhstan. So let's hear what they have to say. And they say that the next problem is Kazakhstan, because the same Nazi processes can start there as in Ukraine. So now they're calling the Kazakh people Nazis as well. It's a very recurrent theme, as you guys can see. And we have the longest border there, and there's a lot of Russians there. And the nuclear fuel for all the Rosatom is also there. So you see, they're already building a casus belli for, a possible, attack of Kazakhstan. If you guys don't remember, last year in January, Kazakhstan asked for Russian help to help mitigate all the protests that they had. Tokayev asked for the Russian government to get involved, and they did. But that came at a cost because there were many reports that some of these Russian soldiers were looting and taking advantage of the situation to steal and loot residential areas and stores. And with what Tokayev, the current president that got reelected recently, from what he sees in Ukraine, he's definitely not interested of getting closer with Russia because he sees that his country and his government is at stake. And we've been seeing a very big distancing, especially from Kazakhstan, from Russian affairs, and really trying to stay away from being very close to Putin. I think Tokayev realizes that he really needs to be careful. And, you can see that the rhetoric now in Russian state TV is that even Kazakhs are against Russia, and then they need to liberate the Russian people in Kazakhstan, which is, obviously I don't believe they would go and invade Kazakhstan because it's a massive country, first of all, and they don't have the assets anymore. They can't, fight two wars at the same time. But it's very interesting to see that, like, their imperialistic ideas don't stop only Ukraine at this point. Anyways, guys, I really appreciate your support. Thank you for watching my videos. That means a lot. And leave me a comment about what you think about this situation with Kazakhstan. Again, I don't think Russia's going to do much, but it's just interesting to see. And again, leave me a like, leave me comments, and I will see you guys in the next video. Thank you.